Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And the Great Unclean Titan project is finished, at least for now. In this video I'm going to show you how I painted up the monster that you'll hopefully have seen on the channel before in the build stages and things. If you haven't seen those, go back and watch it. This is a big, monstrous, horrible model, probably the biggest and freakiest model I have ever personally built. But the paint scheme is actually fairly simple. So if you watched the channel before, you'll have seen I've done quite a few Great Unclean ones, a lot of demons, and essentially all I'm doing here is scaling up that paint scheme. So it is a speed paint, although with a model this big, you clearly can't paint anything overly fast, but it's the same techniques I've used on the speed paints on the smaller models. So you can see, spray it black, sprayed it with a bone white colour, and it is predominantly a contrast paint scheme, although I have started off with the metallics. So you'll have seen there I did a bulk and metal type colour. All the colours will be in the top left of the screen if I get the names wrong, etc. But you can see that. So I did that first, then did a retributor armour for all the kind of brass areas, then moved on to skeleton horde for all the teeth and the bones and the toenails on the little baby feet that have been cast into there, moving on to a contrast black, and then moving here on to a deep yellow to go over all these pustules and horribly nurgly bits. Now this is something that I do vary around actually when I do this scheme sometimes. Before I've done the yellow before the contrast paint or after, I actually find it works better putting it on before you do the contrast paint schemes. Now on here, when I did my original Miasmic Malignifying channel, I used proper paints, if that's the right word, but I used some what you would call standard paints. Contrast, I wasn't really experimenting into those things at the time, but I wanted to replicate a very, very similar effect to what I did on my Miasmic Magnifiers. And actually that Gullum and Flesh colour that I'm putting on the sort of chimneys of that works really, really well. Now here onto the actual skin, you can see I've done a tester around kind of the ear area and around the nose, but this is essentially how I've done it. I've taken 4 contrast paints that will come through in a second. So Gullum and Flesh, dropped that into the sort of little bumps and areas where the flesh has been indented or whatever, put that on, and then worked on the Plague Bearer Flesh on and over the top of that Gullum and Flesh. So that is, I don't want just a plain Plague Bearer Flesh skin, and having those little imprints and indentations and whatever full of that Gullum and Flesh means it makes several different colours of green. You'll get a virtual flesh colour where their flesh has been put on properly, and then as it spreads out you get a number of different colours. I didn't want it just to look completely flat. And when I did the model, I started in a patch and I worked around that patch and sort of gradually around the model. When you hit different areas, like you can see here around one of the mouths that's embedded into the belly, I moved on to that colour, worked around that, and then went back to the flesh. And what that helps it do is as the contrast paint is drying, it will blend in together around those edges where they hit each other. Now in the case of the sort of pink and the green here, you don't want it mixing together too much and making too many weird colours, so just dropping it in to where the two colours meet has a tiny thin blend line. If you were to smear the brush into the pink and then smear it away into the green, you would get lots and lots of strange colours, which is very appropriate to do when you're putting kind of the flesh colour down, as in the Gullum and Flesh, and then the green, but not really appropriate with the pink and the green. So working around the mouth, I've taken a contrast paint scheme colour I've never used before, Dreadful Visage. I saw it in the shop and thought that looks kind of cool, picked that up, and that's gone inside the mouth to be like kind of darker purple colour. Then the actual around the lips is a Majos purple to almost represent that is the lips of this belly mouth, and then working the Plague Bearer Fresh off that. So pulling a little bit of the purple into the green skin area, but not too much. Now I forgot to put the Gullum and Flesh onto the area I've already worked the green on, so you can see they're just dropping it onto the green, and it gives that kind of similar effect. So really just playing and working with the flesh as I'm going around, having a bit of fun with the contrast scheme, but it is a very fast way of doing the skin, although not fast obviously on the size of the model. This was quite a number of evenings. I started some of this skin before I went down to Warhammer World for the big tournament. I've talked about it a few times. We did just 4 of us, a 3,000 point tournament, and I did not get this model done unfortunately. And then when I came back from that, I've had quite a bit of time away at work, etc. So it has taken several weeks, but in there's probably maybe 20 hours of painting on the skin. So although it is a fast technique, there's a lot of this model to cover, and the sheer physical weight of holding it up, etc. can be difficult. Now we've done the skin, so we've done all the flesh area. Now moving on to the fuel tank on the back for the kind of flamer. So I've used the Grell and Earth, which is a Games Workshop technical paint, and it cracks and it breaks and it makes it look like kind of chipped and crackling paint. gone on to, again, use the brass colour onto certain areas. So I want this to look like a really rusty, manky, horrible kind of fuel tank that's full of Nurgle gunge that is being sprayed out of the flamer rather than actual flames. So I painted it red, and again, then moved on. Now there's a lot of small detail on this model, and you know, it's spread all across the model here. And what I didn't want to do is go into hundreds and hundreds of different colours and doing all the smoke plumes, one colour and other colours there. So I kept it fairly simple in that, in terms of the grey. And then when I came on to doing the maggots that I've stuck into the side of the body here, again, I didn't want to go too radically different. So I have picked 4 contrast paint colours, you'll have seen pop up on the screen there, and I basically mixed these colours into the different maggots. And these are the colours I'm also going to use on the Nurglings later on. So whilst there is lots and lots and lots of detail, I am trying to keep the paint scheme fairly muted. You know, yes, it's vibrant, yes, it's going to stand out, but I've not used hundreds of different colours. I've repeated the use of colours across kind of the model as we're going. Now I painted a really vibrant green into the sort of septic-y looking fuel tank, and then typhus corrosion is your friend when you're doing kind of rust and things effect, and I'm putting that over where I've put this brass colour onto the fuel tank. So I want it to look really, really rusty. So the brass, then followed by the rust, and then followed by what we're going to do later, should hopefully work. Now working on these kind of tree growths coming out the top of the body here. So I've taken, again, some contrast paint colours you'll see later, the same colours I've used for the maggots. So this is a Nazdreg yellow onto the kind of mushrooms that are growing on the tree there. I've used the snakebite leather on the strapping. So you see a repetition of the colours I've used previously. Now taking wildwood, which I've not used yet so far, onto the base of the wood here, being careful when I'm going around the flesh, because if you get that wildwood onto the skin, it's going to look a bit weird, because the skin would be almost taking the wood over, not vice versa, was my thoughts. So wildwood, and then at the top, I've taken Mantis Warriors Green and started from the top, pulled it down into the brown, but then pulled some of the brown up into the green, and then dropped some green finally over the top of the brown later on. And this is a super quick wet blending effect that will make these tree growths look really dark at the bottom, really vibrant at the top, and then a mix in kind of in the middle. So really, really quick wet blending as we go. Now it's the wash stage. I'm using 2 washes here, and actually I'm going to use 1 wash, let that dry, come back to the other wash later after finishing the Nurglings. But this is a Vallejo sepia game wash. Now this is a dirty, mucky, kind of horrible wash, and if you've watched the channel a lot, you know I absolutely love this one. It's not going to go on the skin of the model though. This is only going to go on any metallic area, because I kind of want the skin and the metals to have 2 different wash effects, so that it kind of looks like one's natural, if that makes sense, natural flesh, not that demonic flesh is natural, but look natural looking, and one is more metallic looking. So that dirty Vallejo wash I've put onto all the metal areas. The other areas are moving back, and we're just doing finishing touches. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the Nurglings, but suffice to say I use the same wash colours that I use on the maggots, and then it's moving on to the actual wash stage here. So I'm using the Games Workshop sepia shade here. So similar name, sepia shade for Games Workshop, sepia game wash for Vallejo, but 2 radically different final effects. The Games Workshop one does give a slightly dirtied effect, but it's equivalent to, like, that's level 1, and the Vallejo sepia game wash is level 11 in terms of how dirty and things it makes the model. So I'm using the Games Workshop one over the flesh because it won't require me to do any other work on the skin afterwards. It puts a slight dirty sepia tone on it. So I've covered the entire model in that wash, not the metallic areas because that's already been done, and then let it thoroughly dry. And now it is really final details. So this is a 3-stage shade effect to make a burnt effect across this flamer. So it's Druchii Violet, Drakenhof Nightshade, and then Nuln Oil. Druchii Violet goes on to a large area, as you've seen. Then when you move through the 3 colours, you're putting less on, and Nuln Oil is really just around the barrel area, and that gives a really nice burnt, dirty flamer effect. The model has now been varnished, so Munitorum varnish over the whole model to seal it, set it in, because this is going to be a gaming piece. And then once that is thoroughly dried, it is every Nurgle player's friend, Nurgle's Rot. And if you noticed above that ear there, there's been a horrible join line this whole time. So I've not quite got it right when I did the moulding and the milli putting in the build stage. So you put some Nurgle's Rot on it, it covers the mistake. Going around the model doing a similar thing. If you've watched carefully through the build videos and things, the maggots that I used, once I'd sprayed them, and even when they were in the build, they've got sort of seams along them that looked a bit horrible. So I've slapped some Nurgle's Rot on it to cover the seams on those maggots. Nurgle's Rot is your friend, and the model is finished. So let's take a look at it. A Plague Bearer a Chaos Space Marine, a Great Unclean one are all dwarfed by this, what I think is the world's only Warhound Titan that's been turned into a Great Unclean one. Midwinter Minis has done a Warlord Titan, about 3 times the size of this. Very, very cool, probably dwarfs us in comparison. But I like to think this is quite unique. I'm really happy overall with the model. I think the belly's gone really well. I think the pose of the right arm, I'm not quite so happy with the flame, how it's angled. I'd probably change that. I like all the accessories I've used. I love how the skin final effect looks. Not 100% sure on the face. Still not quite 100% sure on that. If you watch the build videos, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I do really like how I've used the Nurglings, all the parts of the Great Unclean ones that I've used bursting out the skin. I think the Miasmic Lignifier parts work really well to add that industrial look into the Titan. I love the maggoty bits coming out the side. I'd probably make the holes a little bit smaller in future rather than the big sort of caverns, but I did have a different idea originally. The fuel tank I like. I think I may have used the wrong colour. Nurgle butthole, yeah, can't go wrong with a Nurgle butthole. I think maybe in the next couple of months, if I decide I want to come back to do it, I might come back and try and do something different with that fuel tank. Or I might sit and leave it, and maybe if I ever decide to do something crazy like this again, I'll do something slightly different. But I think overall, I think I've created what I think is a really, really nice model. I'm really looking forward to using it again, fully painted in an event. Obviously, I took it to the friendly tournament we did, and it wasn't finished. So yeah, definitely looking forward to bringing this back down to Warm World and using it again. I hope you've all enjoyed this kind of build series. If you have, like, comment, subscribe, and keep an eye on the channel for the next weird thing that I'm going to do. Cheers, everyone.